She has crushed 2 TEDx talks. We're going to talk about both. Her new book, Good Awkward, comes out September 26th. I think it's destined to be a bestseller, no doubt about it. She is a former rock star at EY and K-Force. She was at K-Force for like 14 years, killed it there. She's the founder of Priority Group, spelled with a Y. I love that. She is a very sought after global keynote speaker, and I think she's brilliant. She's super funny. And I am incredibly excited to start this conversation. But before we do, Kathy, get us started.
Nothing else will ever do. That needs to happen every time I do anything from now on.
Right?
That was awesome. Yes.
That can be your intro from here on out. So I am so excited to talk to you today. So excited.
I'm so
Anyone
excited
who's
to
super
be here.
good friends with Joe Lohman, I mean, come on. Match made in heaven. Love it.
Oh,
Love
I'm
it.
grateful. Thank you for having me. And I'm so grateful. I was looking through your list of past authors and I'm like, how have these people all become friends? I'm so grateful to be amongst a circle of esteemed previous authors. So
you absolutely belong. And I think September 26th, Good Awkward comes out, but the real title, this has got to be the greatest title of all time. So I'm going to read it, so make sure I don't screw it up. Good Awkward, How to Embrace the Embarrassing and Celebrate the Cringe to Become the Bravest You. That is such a great title. I absolutely love it. So tell us a little bit about how you, I mean, I know it's a part of your last TED Talk, but tell us kind of the origin of the book and what can we expect when we get that copy in our hands on September 26th?
I'd be happy to. Okay, so the origin of the book, and squad, you're going to learn from me. I do not like to keep it real stuffy in business around here. I'm just going to talk to you like we're in a room full of friends.
If you did.
Okay, just make it. I sensed that this was this kind of room. So in the business spheres, you don't think about, a book on awkwardness, right? That's the one I'm going to pick up. Normally we think about, okay, we're thinking confidence, we're thinking courage, we're talking innovation, we're talking risk taking. And so where did this start? I'll give you the quick origin story and then the business story. The origin story is I've been awkward my whole damn life. If you don't see that right now, I think that's hilarious. I still think it's really funny that people don't see that because my whole life I have felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb. So my parents are immigrants to the US. My dad was born in India. My mom was born in Pakistan. I was first born to this country. So my clothes were always a little weird. My food in my lunchbox was real weird. Everybody else had peanut butter and jelly on Wonder Bread. I had, keema paratha, and it made the whole cafeteria smell funny. It was always a story of sticking out when all I wanted to do was fit in. I was born in the early 80s. Hanna-Barbera was a thing. I'm like, God, why did my parents name me Henna? I just want to be Jennifer or Samantha or Jessica. So help me God, right? So I went through my adolescence just playing that wanting to fit in story. I felt awkward and it wasn't good. And then I got to college. And I think like many do, you sort of find your people a little more, you find your lane. But then I remember coming into the professional world, and especially when I started to take an interest in my own professional personal development, like many others in this room, I'm sure, I became an enthusiast of Brené Brown. And I remember in her podcast at the end, she would say, stay awkward, brave, and kind. Stay awkward, brave, and kind. And I'm like, okay, my parents taught me how to be brave and I know how to be kind. Stay awkward. I've been trying to fight that my whole life. What are you talking about, lady? I don't want to stay awkward. That's uncomfortable. I don't like that. And so it led to this curiosity and this exploration about this particular emotion, especially in the workplace, and how it can hold us back. And thus the awkward movement was born.
And how do you see awkwardness as kind of like a superpower almost?
Yeah, I'll give you a very quick working definition so we're all operating from it. Awkwardness is a social emotion. So social emotion means, okay, let's say you trip over your own 2 feet in the kitchen, but nobody was there to see you. You might say, ow, but you're not going to really feel awkward about it. Nobody saw you. Social emotion means other people are present, right? And it's also an emotion of discomfort. I'm not going to pretend that awkwardness feels good in the moment. It typically doesn't. But awkwardness is the emotion that we feel when the person we believe ourselves to be, our true self, is for a moment at odds with the person that they see on display. In other words, our internal identity doesn't match the external reality. So if I'm someone at work who believes that I have really good ideas, I raise my hand, I share one, and it's like thud, right? Awkward silence. People are like, what? No, right? The person I believe myself to be, smart, capable, adds good ideas to the table, is all of a sudden, for a moment, there's a gap between that person and the person they see on display. What's she talking about? She doesn't know what she's talking about. What an idiot, right? And in that gap, in that space, we feel the emotion of awkwardness. Awkwardness lives in uncertainty. And so when we think about embracing awkwardness as a superpower, what it really points to is most people, when they think about their own awkwardness or their feelings of awkwardness, we have this idea that, gosh, we just need to get rid of it. It needs to be eliminated. And the truth of the matter is we can't, because to eliminate awkwardness means eliminating all of life's uncertainty. And if any of you outliers have cracked the code on that, please hook a girl up, because I have not figured that one out yet. We cannot avoid it. And so rather, it becomes an exercise in staying in that gap space a little bit longer, learning how to become comfortable in it and actually running towards it. When we can do that with more comfort, with more frequency, it helps us keep pushing towards the direction of risks, of more courageous conversations, of the things we want to do, because that fear of awkward moments or that fear of that exposure can cause inaction. It holds us back. So leaning in intentionally is really part of the key.
That's very interesting. So, have you ever heard this story about Sarah Blakely?
I have a lot of
So,
stories about Sarah Blakely, but
so
which one?
Sarah, if Sarah feels like she hasn't like embarrassed herself in a while or put herself in an awkward position, she'll go into an elevator and she'll like start singing, or she'll do something like to purposely create this kind of awkward, embarrassing space. And
Yeah.
I don't know, Sarah's just one of those people that I think the combination of when you're really bright like yourself, but you've got that vulnerability of awkwardness, it's like such a phenomenal combo.
I
I
agree.
was thinking as you were talking of the actress Jennifer Lawrence. Isn't she the one? I think she fell on stage when she was getting her Academy
She's
Award
the
or something
opening
like that.
story of the book, Scott. So I love where
What?
your head is going. Yes, she's my
Yeah.
opening
So
story.
I mean, it's such a, I think people love her, and there's so many other examples of people that we kind of love because they're brilliant and they're talented, but they're self-deprecating. And I see
Yeah.
that in you. So I love the fact that you've created that into kind of a superpower for yourself. Do you think that's one of the reasons why? I mean, you had, I'd say, like a historic run at K Force. Like you crushed it at K Force for what, 14 years?
14 years. Yeah. 14 and a half. I think that contributed to it. And so I'm South Asian. There's a lot of like humility that's beaten into me, right? But I think
Yep.
it's important that we own our wins. The second TEDx is about this, right? Good bragging and the things that have contributed. I will also add, and if I can say so humbly, it's what's created this insane meteoric rise. I only left my previous job at K-Force in late 2019 and started this whole shebang in early 2020. I think people think I've been doing this a lot longer than I have. And The book already has earned the rare Kirkus star, and I've gotten endorsements from amazing, incredible, high profile people. And I just heard Barnes and Noble place a national buy for the book, which is huge. That means it's going to be in every store. They believe it's going to do well. And I don't share these things to be braggy, although I do believe we should brag, even though it's awkward. But I share these things because I believe very much that staying in this tension place of trying stuff, even when I could have embarrassed myself, or asking, even when it could have been like, why would I do that for you? Right. It's all of these little micro moments of awkwardness that feed this. And Scott, I have to just add that story about Sarah and the elevators and stuff. I think I actually have a version, if not that story, in the book. But what you'll notice that's different about that story versus the normal narrative about get comfortable getting uncomfortable, right? We know this. We know we need to play on our uncomfortable edge, but there's a distinction here. A lot of times when we think about put yourself out of your comfort zone, stretch your comfort zone, we can stretch certain mental muscles in isolation. There's certain things we can do that are mindset exercises that can make us uncomfortable, but don't necessarily require another. When we're talking about this work and what Sarah does on the elevator, for example, this is strengthening a very specific type of mental muscle, and that's our social mental muscles. Times where other people's reactions, other people's opinions, other people's approval are going to play a role in our behavior. And what I love that Sarah does is she intentionally creates opportunities to build that specific muscle, which is very different from, I just need to stay in my fear, over XYZ a little bit longer. It's specific to social situations.
Exactly. So you brought it up, good bragging, your second TED Talk. And I love how you make things that are maybe seem negative, like awkwardness or bragging, and you put good in front of it. So tell us a little bit about good bragging. What's good bragging?
Yeah. The question that the second TEDx set out to answer, and frankly, most people who do TEDx's, it's because they want to know these things for themselves, right? So this is the question I needed the answer to, which is, in a hybrid world where we need to share our wins in order to be seen as competent, how do we do that when the world tells us bragging is bad? Right? We need to share our wins publicly in order for people to see us as competent, as capable, as an expert. They know what they're talking about. And yet, again, South Asian parents, in Pakistani culture, we call it nazar. It's kind of the same as like the Greek evil eye, right? Don't talk about your stuff or people are going to curse you from across the room. So this was very present in my mind. But the truth is, if I don't share my wins, I don't work in an office every day. People can't hear me having a success. So I have to publicly share those wins. So when it comes to bragging, oftentimes we get very hung up in our idea of what bragging is. And what bragging is in most people's mind is bad bragging, which is we're propping ourselves up for solo validation, right? Look at me, look at what I did, pay attention to this thing. When good bragging, and I'm really simplifying it here, you can watch the whole TEDx, but good bragging, instead of having the intention of bragging be on solo validation, look at me and look at what I did. Instead, if you just shift your intention to social celebration, that is celebrating yourself and your win, but simultaneously celebrating others, the impact of bragging comes off as very differently. It comes off very different. So an example of this could be, in my post today, I shared something about, I'm so grateful for XYZ and all the people that helped me get there, right? And the community of people that helped make this a possibility. When we enroll others into the conversation and it's kind of a, hey, we did this, right? I did this, and here's the role that other people played. Or I did this, maybe I did it by myself. Maybe other people didn't play a role, but in turn, I turn around and say, Bruce, I loved that post. That was awesome. That really had me thinking. Lindsay, I just want to celebrate you for that thing that you shared the other day, right? If you can regularly be this hype squad member for other people, it increases your perception of competence and expertise, and it keeps intact your warmth and likability. So we need to not keep our wins to ourselves. That's not serving us in this modern climate. Bragging can feel awkward. It is inherently one of the more awkward things we do. But if we can prioritize that sense of social celebration, it lands totally differently.
It's so true. I've been a big believer in giving back my whole life. It just is something that I think is incredibly important. And I think for years and years and years, uh, I'm like, well, I'm doing these things because I want to do them and not for accolades. And what I realized, it was like an epiphany moment. I'm like, I'm not really sure I'm inspiring anybody if nobody knows these things. And as soon as we created under my company something new, we created what we call something good, and we put out an impact report, and we talked very openly about this ripple effect that we feel like we can have by sharing the things that we do. It spurned so many wonderful things, and it changed my perception of what I've thought of as bragging in the
Yeah,
past.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm gonna be a bit, pointed here. It pains me to wonder how many people, even in this room, might be the world's best kept secret.
Yeah.
How many of you are so freaking good at something that you do and people just don't know because they don't get to hear about it that much, right? And so we have to have a means of which that we can share these things about ourselves, share our accomplishments, share our wins. But again, the fear is staying warm and likable, which does count for something. I'd love to tell you that I'll be one of these people who's like, I don't care if people like me. Lies. All lies. I definitely care if people like me. I really want people to like me. That's the truth. That's just in my blood. That's who I am. So for me, the tension isn't, can I become someone I'm not? I don't know that I'll ever be that person, but can I be someone who strategically shares my wins in a way that creates an environment where warmth and likability aren't dinged as a result? And that's where good bragging comes into play.
Yeah. I think for both of us, because we come from staffing, when I hear job candidates that are rock stars say, yeah, I'm just terrible about, talking about myself. I'm like, but these are things you accomplished. Like you really did. You're not making this shit up. Like
Yeah.
you have to. This is your opportunity. But so many people have that fear that it's going to come across as, braggadocious.
Yeah. Well, and one of my favorite expressions is it's not bragging if you've done it.
Exactly. Exactly. So you have crushed the TEDx stage twice. Uh, in this community, we have a lot of people that have done TED Talks, but a lot that would love to do one. What advice would you give somebody who wants to summon up the bravery to stand on that red dot?
Yeah, I love the question. So I'm going to start with maybe a pre-question and then an answer. The pre-question is, have you asked yourself why you want to do it? Because the truth is, if it's only for the notoriety or the views or whatever, it's exhausting. It's a huge exhausting process. So my hope is that whatever the topic is you land on, that you believe in it enough that you are willing to roll up your sleeves and do the work to make it really great. I need you to just be really dialed in on whatever it is that you feel called to speak about, because it will be effort. And the thing about TEDx is whether you nail it, whether you crush it on that dot or you screw it up royally, guess what? That thing lives on the internet anyway. So it really behooves you to do your best, right? To put in all that effort. The second thing I would offer is when it comes to landing one, and I get this question often because I did not only two, but really close together. I don't know if you guys know, I did them in 90 days apart. So the first one I had 4 or 5 months to prepare. The second one, and there's actually a story behind this. The second one, the organizer actually had been referred to me, reached out to me and said, this was November 9th. And he said, Henna, I had somebody drop out for December 10th. Do you want to do it? And I said, no. Literally, that was my first reaction. I was like, a month to come up with an idea, to write a script, to edit a script, then memorize a script, actually get my hands doing something. Are you kidding me? A month? The other one took 4 or 5 months. And then as soon as that came out of my mouth, I had another thought, which was, who the hell as a professional speaker says no to calling themselves a 2-time TEDx speaker? That was thought number 2. And then I was like, forget that whole thing that I just said. I'll figure it out. Yes. Yes. Firm yes. And I'll figure it out. So once I committed to that yes, then it became What are some of the things that I believed at my core? And then how could I reverse engineer? And this is the key for TEDx, which is a very unique angle or a very unique perspective on that idea. So there's a bunch of ways that we can get to this, but I want to just give you one thing that worked for me, especially with that short time frame for number 2 is, so I kind of landed this on this idea of, it was in the world of awkwardness for a while. And then I would hear people say, bragging is so awkward. Bragging sucks. I don't like doing it. It feels incredibly awkward. So I would go to scholar.google.com, which is, if you've not used it, it's how you kind of look at studies in an aggregate way. And just every now and then I would check to see, like, what is the latest stuff that's come out about bragging, about self-promotion, about any of these things. And actually I landed on a study that was relatively new about this idea of dual promotion that came out of George Mason University. I read it, I read the study, I read the data, and I literally had this moment of, this is what I do that I don't even realize that I do. And I don't think other people realize that they can do this too, right? So it created an entry point. It created a side door entry into something that isn't brand new. I mean, I think there's other TEDx's about self-promotion, about talking about your wins, but it was a specific angle that had not been touched before. So that is the key. If you want to get picked up by a TEDx or you want to get their attention, it cannot be something that's been done to death. It can be in the same area, but it needs to have a slightly fresh entry point for them to see it as an idea worth spreading, which is the whole premise. They just want an idea worth spreading.
So here you are, an entrepreneur. You've had a kick-ass career. You've been on, multiple stages, written a book, etc. And you posted about a week ago about having your first ever panic attack. Tell us a little bit about that and what did you learn?
Yeah, it was awful, by the way. If anybody else experiences this on a regular basis, I'm so sorry. It was awful. I had never had one before. I'll tell you what I did. I'll give you the simple version and I'll give you the lesson. The simple version is I'd spent a week in Portugal. It was lovely. I unplugged, I breathed. I think I checked my work email like a handful of times from my phone, but I didn't open a laptop. I was really proud of myself. And then, despite knowing better, because I had done this wonderful unplug, I came back and I tried to make up for lost time, right? I tried to sprint. I didn't warm up. I just tried to start sprinting right away to try to make up for lost time. I didn't give myself space. I didn't give myself a chance to reset or take deep breaths in the middle of the day. And there was, a series of things that had sort of happened that week that all piled on one another. And, something benign happened on a Saturday morning and my body was just like, nope, that's it. Right. And I started becoming short of breath. I had to sit down. I had never experienced something like that. And I'll tell you that the biggest lesson, was you cannot sprint after you've unplugged. This whole self-care thing doesn't get to be in extreme chunks. You don't get to say, I took a big rest and now I'm going to sprint so hard without breathing, right? It doesn't work like that. And so despite, again, cognitively knowing better, it was a very good reminder that knowing isn't doing. Knowing isn't action. And despite the fact that I teach this stuff often, all of us, even those of us who appear to have it together, appear to have some success, we can fall victim to our own fears of scarcity, fears of things going away, fears of things not, getting caught up on. And I learned a hard lesson. I needed to take a few more deep breaths and I didn't listen to my body when it started to tell me that I was going too fast. So
I love that you were vulnerable and brave enough to do that. And one of the things that you talk about, anyone that follows Henna will kind of hear this theme. She talks about building braver teams. And I think it's brave to share what you shared. I think it's so important as leaders that we help build braver teams. What would your recommendation be to all the leaders on this call about how do we go about doing that?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that we can do this. The first, and obviously in the spirit of the more recent book and the research, is we need to normalize that when we are taking more risks, when we are leaning into our courage more, that's going to invite more awkwardness, more missteps, more uncertainty. And so what I encourage teams to do is create space for these conversations. Don't just wait until something happens and we talk about it. Create space. So at the beginning of a meeting, I like to have leaders do bad idea brainstorms. Okay. For 5 minutes, everyone throw out an idea. Doesn't matter how much it's unrealistic, potentially terrible, right? Just throw out ideas. Now people are like, why would we want to throw out bad ideas? Because guess what? Often in a bad idea brainstorm, there's a good one where you're like, well, actually, that is unrealistic, but hold on, maybe there's something there. Or the other byproduct is when you do things like this, there's actually evidence that says that the ideas that follow for the rest of the meeting are more creative, more innovative, more generative, because people let their guards down, right? Similarly, you can do cracked egg stories, which is I invite people at the beginning of meetings, partner up or get into small trios and share what's one thing that cracked this week, didn't go well, misstep, failure, embarrassing story, awkward moment. Share it, normalize it, because the thing about awkwardness, the thing about embarrassment, cringe moments is in those moments, it feels like it's just us. It feels like it's just us. You know, sometimes we can move through it quick. Other times we're in the shower later and they're like, oh my God, that guy's still probably thinking I'm such a moron, right? Feels like it's just us. So it's about normalizing those moments. So again, the wall comes down, the armor comes down, and we can actually have more lucrative, more innovative conversations following those. So normalizing those types of conversations and including them intentionally early on is part of the key.
It's such great advice. So we have so many people that want to ask you a question, but I'm going to sneak one last one in.
Okay.
And I think I know the answer to this, but when did you realize that you were an outlier? Because you really are an outlier. You're different.
Oh my gosh, that's very kind. And okay. So in the spirit of awkwardness and vulnerability, here's something that I don't say enough out loud. I'm not afraid to fail, but I am deathly terrified of success. I'm much more afraid to succeed than I am to fail. And I think it's a function of just how I grew up, South Asian household, achievement orientation. If I fail, I think I'll recover. If I succeed, then the weight is on my shoulders, right? I got to keep that up. I got to keep going. I got to raise the stakes. I got to raise the bar. So that stuff scares me more often than not. I'll share that, 14 years at K-Force on paper, I had the dream gig, guys. I had the dream gig. My kids are now 13 and 11. So I got married there, I had babies there, toddlers there. I was working from home more days a week than not, back when nobody else was. I know that's not like a big thing now, but back then, everybody else had to be in the office. I got to work from home. I got to set my hours. I was making great money. On paper, people would be like, why the hell would you leave that? Why would you leave that? It is the dream gig. And I remember for 2 full years, I remember having this voice in my chest or this, kind of butterflies in my stomach going, you were meant for more than this. You're good at it. Golden handcuffs are tight. You're good at it. You make good money. It's really good for you, but you are capable of more than this. People are coming to you trying to up-level themselves, and you are not challenging yourself to your full potential. I knew it. I knew it for 2 years, but it took me 2 years to find the courage to listen to that voice and say, I know myself. If I hold on to this trapeze, there's no way I'm grabbing that one. So I just gotta and trust in my ability to figure it out as I go. So really it was that voice that was like, you've outgrown this. Are you going to listen or are you going to squash it down? And one day I finally listened.
A great book if you haven't read it already. Laura Gassner-Otting is on the Outlier Project board. She wrote Wonder Hell, her second book after Limitless. She actually just got inducted into the Outlier Hall of Fame along with Joe. And Wonder Hell is just a really, really good book that addresses exactly.
LGO has been a one of many wonderful people who's been a bit of a mentor to me. And so I'm publishing through the same imprint that she did, Idea Press, and she introduced me to Rohit and that team. So yeah, Laura and I, because she shares the executive search background, similar background that I do, I've learned a lot from her. And so, secondarily too, I'll say before I made this leap, even though I was thinking about it for 2 years, I tried to look for people who were doing things that I wanted to do, that I thought maybe I could do. And Laura early on was kind enough to take a few minutes with me because she seemed to be in the world that I thought I might like to join one day. And so don't necessarily jump in eyes closed either. When I started to listen to those whisperings, it's not like I was just like, peace out, K-Force, I'm going to go be an entrepreneur over here. Oh no, I planted lots of little seeds for months about what's executive coaching about? What's speaking about? What are these things about? And had lots and lots of conversations. And only then did I make the move, but planted seeds first.
All right, we have got people lined up around the building to ask you questions. And we are starting with Tom back from Machu Picchu to ask you a question. Tom Doherty, you're up with Henna Pryor.
Hey, Anna, I have a question. I don't know if you address it in the book or not, but when you think of awkwardness and labels, is it in there about embracing the label? Because I know when I was younger, I would fight the label. Whereas now that I'm older, I embrace the label. I don't really feel the same way.
I love it. No, yes, we do talk about it in the book. It's a great question. And so I'll share two thoughts. First is just a little piece of data that I think is interesting to inform this conversation. Most humans that are sort of, neurotypical do not even feel the emotion of awkwardness until early adolescence. So age 8 or 9. It's a self-conscious emotion, and we don't experience self-consciousness really below age 8. And this will track, right? If you've got little people in your life, kids, nephews, nieces, neighbors, you're like, they don't grow up, right? They're just in the kitchen, belting that song out of the top of their lungs. They don't care who's looking because they haven't developed that barometer of self-consciousness yet. It's about 8 or 9 that we start to look around going, oh, does this fit in with what other people like? Does this seem to track with what other people approve of? So it's something that we learn and develop. To your question about identities, and I think this is such an important one, I hear from you, Thomas, that you don't mind the label. So in that case, it's fine. But in many cases, people do use this word awkward in one of two ways. It's either a trait, this is who I am. I am socially awkward. I am awkward. Or it's a state. It's fleeting. It's transient. I just had an awkward conversation. I feel really awkward about that negotiation. I just gave a presentation. I felt so awkward about it, right? It's a feeling. It's a temporary state. Now, if you identify with it as a trait and it is not holding you back, if you now own it and you lean in, good for you. I don't think you have to change a thing. But if you are someone who uses that label as a protective mechanism and it's stopping you from doing things that you want to do, to that, I would say, by definition, awkwardness is subjective. There is no such thing as a factually awkward person. It is up to someone else to deem us so, or it's up to us to deem ourselves so. But there is no such thing as a factually awkward person. It's subjective. It's an opinion. So if that's a term we're using to label ourselves and it's not serving us, if it's keeping us from networking or raising our hand, then I encourage people to not use the language of it as a label, as an identity. It's not I am awkward. It's the reframing of I feel awkward right now, or I felt awkward in that conversation. But we have to shift that language to from permanent to more of a temporary transient if it's going to help us move out of our own way.
Great stuff. Thank you.
Sure. Great question.
All right, we are going next to somebody that in 3 weeks has a dance off with me at our retreat. So I know she is going to be feeling very awkward. She's a professional dancer. I have no training whatsoever. I'm going to absolutely blow the doors off of that thing. Lindsay just took New York by storm, but she's in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Lindsay, you're up with Henna.
So all of this you prepared marvelously for what I'm going to say. So I was just in New York and so it's like 9 p.m. and I go to a building and there's a dance club at the top, rooftop. So get in the elevator and it's packed. So like maybe 10 or 15 guys. So we're jam packed going, I don't know, for 20, 30, whatever. And so we're just keep rising 4, 5. And I look around and everybody is just staring at the numbers. And I'm thinking, we're getting off and we're all going to be like touching each other. Like Latin dance is sensual. Yeah. And so I go, this is hilarious. We won't even talk in here. Like I literally look around, I go, but we're going to be dancing together really soon. Right. And they all just like stopped and they looked around. And when you talked about the shield, like the shield just dropped. Because in that moment, we all just became humans who were just going to walk up the elevator and go dance closely together. And so I say that to say, what is your preparation in your personal life for as you enter into your social life? Like, what do you do in
Mhm.
your dark, quiet moments to prepare?
I love that. First of all, thank you for sharing that example. That's such a perfect example, right? Of all it takes is one person to name the tension in the room or name the thing that everybody else is thinking for everyone else's shoulders to relax. You know, I hear this a lot with networking events. All it takes is one person to go, God, networking events are awful, aren't they? Or gosh, they're the most awkward thing. And then everybody else's shoulders just go back down. They're like, yes, thank God. Thank God someone said it. So I love that example. And I just want to maybe add one more layer, which is Lindsay, the elevator thing is really funny. There was a study that was recently done by YouGov that says 30% of people will slam that door close button on an elevator just to avoid riding up with someone, right? I saw there was a meme I posted on LinkedIn the other day, a meme that was going around that, you know, the gas pump wasn't working and it said, please see cashier. And the person wrote, well, guess I don't need gas anymore, right? Like just gonna go on fumes. This is what it's become. And so what Lindsay's pointing to, and part of the ethos of the action steps of the book is we need to condition these social muscles more proactively. So fortunately, unfortunately, conditioning for awkward isn't something we can do completely by ourselves because it is a social emotion. So it's how can we create micro moments of interaction with other humans where it's not required. Simple example, call and order in your food instead of doing it online. That sounds insane that it's as simple as that anymore. But how often do we? We will avoid speaking with another human who's not someone we know at all costs. I was having a conversation with my daughter the other day, and her friend lives in a part of the area that we live in that has very poor cell signal. So she was at her friend's house. And I said, okay, I'll ring the doorbell when I get there. And she's like, why are you going to ring the doorbell? Just text me. I'm like, first of all, there's no signal there, but this is where we've gotten. We now text here instead of having to have a 2-minute interaction with whoever is on the other side of the door, right? Call me a child of the early 80s. I used to talk to my parents' friends on the phone for a little bit, right? Before they came on the line. But understanding, and again, I'm not saying that's a shame, generation of workers. They can't help how they grew up, right? Some of us can't help the technologies that are available to us. But what we can do is create intentional opportunities to keep these muscles alive and well. So, you know, if my daughter's order is wrong at the restaurant, I don't talk to the server. I say, hey, can you please let the server know where this is? You know, and does she like me for it? Absolutely not. But these are the muscles where we now have to over-index, you know, in this world of technology and things being automated by AI. There's more and more research that says our social muscles, our ability to interact with other humans is now going to be at a super premium. And unfortunately, we live in a world that is optimizing for smoothness. So in Lindsay's case, I love that in that moment, she's like, you know what? I'm going to be the one to say the thing, right? As often as possible, when you have an opportunity to be around other humans and you can be the one to break the ice, micro moments, or in that case, sort of like a macro moment, all of them count. All of them count. They're all reps to keeping that social muscle strengthened.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Tom, I
Lindsay,
love your,
on a
I hate when people
scale of
text
1
me
to
and ask me.
10, how nervous are you for our moonwalk dance off? Are you at an 11?
45.
All right. Mark Holden in Chicago is going to be there at the retreat to witness this epic dance off. You are up with Henna.
Scott, just to let you know, I was called Crazy Legs in college for a very particular reason.
You can get in on this if you want.
Hannah, thank you so much for being here today and speaking with us. The Outlier community is an astounding one, so thank you again. When it comes to your TEDx talks and really just public speaking, I love how you say that if you want to learn something, give a speech on it, because you really do figure out what you don't know when you try to articulate a particular topic. But relative to your impact as a natural outlier, how do you see the significance of your public speaking, your platform? How do you see the significance of the canon of information you've delivered on stage to the public?
Oh boy. Well, first, I feel like I have to start with gratitude and humility. Like there's still days where, you know, I'm not here to BS you guys. There's still days where I'm like, why is this working for me? And there's other people who are trying to do similar things and, you know, maybe having a little bit of a tougher time. That sometimes feels unclear. But what I do know and what I will say is in this noisy marketplace, too often we try to be palatable a lot of this good awkward movement is about, we try to be socially palatable. Will people like this instead of different? And it's very noisy. It is good to be liked, but it is better to be different. And so I think slowly shaking off the shackles of approval, right? Like, I'm starting to get trolls. Am I handling it like a champ? Lies. No, I am not. But is it a growth edge that I am working on every day because I know that that's where my impact will rise? Yeah, 100%. And, I think part of the research of this book, I realized, and I think all of us know this in this community, I know I can't be the first person to say it, is you're not going to please everybody. You're not going to please everybody. I did a keynote a couple weeks ago. I got my review form. It's like 98%. Great speaker, engaging, learned so much, great content. And the one person that was like, this felt like a boring TEDx talk. I was like, well, damn, right? Everybody else loved it. Am I going to change what I delivered for that one person? Maybe I reminded them of a high school bully they didn't like. Maybe there was somebody they dated who broke their heart that I reminded them of. I don't know, right? I don't know. And so I think the more mental work that I've done around caring if I'm different more than caring if I'm palatable has helped increase the significance, the impact. That said, I think, again, I don't like it when people make it all about just, kind of like luck and impact. I work my ass off. Like, I know everybody does. Like, I read constantly. I'm, constant input in order to find fresh output. And I think I try to read outside of the industry a lot. I don't read just professional and personal development books. I try to read fiction. I try to read, I watch interesting documentaries about like historical, war dramas. But to me, sometimes the most interesting insights or more interesting metaphors or connections come from things that are entirely unrelated to the industry. And that's where fresh perspectives kind of kick up and come from. So while these communities are magic, these communities are absolute magic, don't get me wrong. Also, make sure you're dipping your toe into other random sources of information too, because I think that's where impact comes from sometimes, those fresh perspectives.
Thank you.
Sure.
Love it. One of the cool aspects of the Outlier Project is we've got people from all over the world. So we've got, just on this call, we've got people from Spain, Switzerland, the UK, and Texas, I think. So we are going to the UK. We're going to London. Isabel, you're up.
Hi, Hannah.
Hi.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
I wanted to ask and build actually on what Tom spoke about. I'm going to do something that I wasn't expecting to do, but I'm going to do it because you've inspired me to do it. I was diagnosed with ADHD 3 weeks ago. So it's very new and I'm processing it. And it's a very bizarre diagnosis for me as an adult because it resonates hugely. All the symptoms are very familiar to me and have been all my life. But to now have that label, I was fascinated by what you said because in your work and as a performer myself, I've had thousands of awkward moments on stage and people love it. They love it when things go wrong on stage. So I love that dichotomy that you talked about. But I'm really curious about your work with that neurodiverse.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know even what to call it, but
Sure.
people, humans,
Sure.
Right? And whether or not you find that you are able to, whether you are able to find a different kind of language, even for them, or if you're even conscious of that, or is it exactly the same? No matter who you're dealing with. I hope that's clear enough as a question. It's very wordy.
Yeah,
Okay.
It is. And I think, one of the bravest acts of courage is to know when things are in your lane and when they're not. So I'll say specifically in the research for this book, I did not deeply study neurodivergent populations. What I think maybe is sort of the subtext of the question is there are some social challenges that can definitely affect neurodivergent populations very, very differently. And so in that context, just more wearing my executive coach hat, to me, the opportunity lies with building understanding, awareness, and psychological safety amongst the teams and the people that work with them. You know, I have several friends who, my sister and her daughter are ADHD, and what I've come to learn is they're both brilliant. I mean, brilliant, and learn and process very differently than I do. And so to give her her best chance of success and feeling, especially my niece is a little bit, you know, tougher in social situations, certain environments help her thrive. And so for that situation, I think there's some specific environmental things that we can address. Now, this does not speak to traditional neurodivergency, but I wanted to just touch on the identity piece. So I remember about a year ago, my therapist said, Henna, did anyone ever tell you that you deal with like a low hum level of anxiety? And I'll tell you, I had a very visceral reaction to that. I'm not proud of this, but I had a very visceral reaction. I said, what are you talking about? Because in my head, anxiety was something that was people struggled with anxiety. And I'm someone who generally perceives myself as an optimist, positive person. I can get through things without difficulty. And I remember she said to me, Henna, do you feel like you're always on? And I was like, yes. Why are you asking? Right? She goes, that's what I mean. You're just constantly, you don't let yourself completely relax. You rarely let yourself go to pure reset. You're always on. You're always waiting to catch the next ball. You're always at this like level of preparedness, like a dog who's constantly on edge. And when she said that, two things happened. First, I realized that that word as an identity was something that I had created an entire story about in my head, what that represented. And second, she was right. She was right. I am always on. And that gave me some new language to think about how I might like to improve my performance habits and some of my day-to-day behaviors to better support the type of career and life that I wanted to build. And so, you know, to Isabel, I would say with a relatively new diagnosis, I'm sure that means a lot of things to you right now. But, you know, I hope that maybe with time and with a little bit more exploration, there's a deep relief and understanding and awareness and how this may support your goals and even behaviorally, how you might be able to help others support you. But I know that's tough when it's new.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Great answer. We're going to Connecticut. Jeff Gample, you're up.
Scott Greger, thank you. Henna, good afternoon. Thank you for being here.
Of course.
As a current, I don't know if I'm former, current staffing professional, like Scott, like Jerry, myself, I've been doing it for 40 years. And maybe for 39 years, I wanted to do something else, but I'm pretty good at it. I enjoy it, but I love public speaking. I never took that step. I have had some opportunities to be in front of groups. The largest was actually 1,500 people. I can remember the high I had, the adrenaline rushing to this day. So how do you make that step? I know you talked about the little voice you had, planting seeds. Did you consider doing both for a while? How do I make that pivot? Doesn't have to be all or nothing, but I just took 5 months off, and today it's after Labor Day. I was ready to go back and get my word out again. And now I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe I want to say something different. So, and we have a lot of speakers on this group, but from the staffing point of view, I could identify with you to some degree. When you're doing well in staffing, it's a good gig. It is.
Yeah.
So how do I at 68, how do I make that pivot, Henna?
Yeah, no, great question. And I applaud you for being so thoughtful about it. There's a couple things I'd share. Is first thing is often we forget about some of the journey steps on, and I like your choice of word, the pivot. I don't ever suggest to people, you know, take a 180-degree turn or take this giant leap. You know, I'm not talking about going from staffing, hey, Jeff, go open a bar in the Caribbean, right? This is not realistic for 99% of humans. It's just not realistic. But what is more realistic, and I love your choice of words, is a pivot. So when I finally decided to exit staffing, now to answer your question about, you know, did I do both at once? I didn't, but I know many people who do. I didn't because I know my personality. I am not good at splitting my attention. I'm somebody who tends to, once I decide I'm passionate about something, I go all in. And I knew that by trying to do both, I was fast track to disaster burnout. There was no way I was going to be able to do both with full attention. So I fortunately, between my successful staffing career, my husband does have a full-time job where he does, well as well. I had the opportunity, the privilege to be able to say, done here, I'm going to focus over here. But on the pivot piece, I did not start talking about awkwardness. I didn't start public speaking on, holistic sales training. I started with what I knew, which was staffing. And so early on, I would think of how can I add value to staffing organizations? I would reach out to the various staffing conferences. I would offer to speak for no fee or very little fee, or, hey, can you just cover my travel? And for me early on, it was just about reps. Like, what can I talk about frequently and with value? What is my unique stance on some of the things in this industry? But I 100% started with what I knew and what I had expertise in. So given your, long tenure in history, there's a lot of talk about, kind of what the tenured folks know and what the new generation of staffing professionals need to know. And maybe there's some value you can add about how to bridge that gap. But I would start in an area that feels somewhat known to you. And then over time, as you talk about things, you'll kind of start to realize what your unique perspectives and angles are. And from there, you can slowly follow the spokes. But that's where it went for me. I don't think that many people jump from A to B without planting some seeds of familiarity along the way. So minimum viable first step, what can you teach folks in the industry that you know already? And I can tell you, there's lots of people in this industry that would love someone with your level of expertise.
Thanks, Henna. Thank you.
Sure.
Love it. All right. We're going to try to get 3 questions in record time. Dan, Atlanta, Georgia, you're up.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Hannah. Isabel, by the way, being part of the neurodiverse community is a gift. Don't ever forget that. By the way, ADHD is probably more of a lifestyle than it is a diagnosis these days. Yeah. Real quick, if you could expand, Hannah, on, it's kind of new for me to be self-promoting, but if you could expand on some tips or share with us a little bit more about the feeling of bragging versus really bringing intentional inspiration or trying to find ways to move people. Just maybe a couple of tips that you would suggest.
Sure.
That uncomfortableness isn't there as much as.
Yeah. I'll try to give you kind of some actionable things here if helpful. I mean, word choice matters, right? So if you say something like, I crushed that project, people are going to be like, you're kind of irritating, right? But if you say something like, I'm really proud of the effort that I put in on that project and the fact that it was well received, or, especially given the hard work that went into that project, I'm so grateful that the team had XYZ response, right? 2 phrases that land very differently because you're acknowledging it's not just, hey, I'm amazing, but hey, this is the effort that went into it. And I'm just really thrilled to see that the outcome was what I hoped it would be. That's a very human, very relatable experience. Secondarily, I think, again, in as much measure as possible, I don't want us to ever use language that diminishes us and our contributions. But obviously, when we speak to the actual effort or activity of, hey, this report went out and I'm just really grateful that, so-and-so received it this way, or so-and-so had this to say about it. My team and I worked really hard on it, right? There's ways that you can use language that help keep it less as a self-promotional spotlight or a solo validation spotlight. How can we use the we language? Now, last thing is sometimes feel free to make it about you. This is the part that is difficult. I want to own this. It's very difficult to say, I did this. So I just got a Kirkus star for my book. That's a huge deal. I'm really proud of myself. So I shared a LinkedIn post that was like, and this is true. This wasn't me just being all, woe is me. I can't believe it. It was, I can't believe that I got a Kirkus star, especially with all the work that went into this. But then towards the end, this is the social celebration bit. At the end of that post, I said, honestly, I almost didn't write this book. And so it's only possible thanks to this supportive community of people that kept me going to get this thing over the finish line. So in that sense, I gave them that we're in it together, that social celebration piece, which made the early, hell yeah, I want a Kirkus star feel more palatable to the masses. My likability didn't take a ding. That helpful? And it's quick, but.
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Hannah, I want to be respectful of your time. Can we get 2 more questions in, or
I'm good until the half hour. Yep.
All right, perfect. All right, we'll do this quick. We're going to Yarrow in Florida.
Hi, Hannah. Thank you.
Hi.
Thanks
Hi.
for reaching out. I'm excited to connect with you more. I also want to acknowledge just you're so eloquent in such a human and relatable way. So thanks for that too. From the perspective of workforce development, I'm career pivoting myself right now and doing some intentional work on target audience. So I want everybody to love their job. I want everybody to bring their best self to the workplace, but realizing that that's unrealistic. So low hanging fruit, people who are already internally motivated, people who are working in a space that already has development pieces incorporated is obviously a good place to go. And I realize that. There are some people that may or may not realize their rock starness. So there's two categories there that I have clear. I feel like there's a good swath of people who just haven't asked for the rock starness to come out. And I have a heart for those people. And yet I feel like it's kind of a funny space to go. So just curious, I guess from the lens of bravery, what your thoughts are for that kind of in between, but if asked, maybe they'd shine.
I want to laser in on the question. Are you trying to decide where to focus your energy a little more?
Or more so your thoughts on spending energy on the less low-hanging fruit.
Okay, so here's my controversial hot take. I said we're going to be different, right? I say to hell with all those people that are like, the riches are in the niches. Pick one. To hell with all of them. Okay, no, not to hell with all of them. I'm sure they're kind people. Here's my take, though. I could not stand when everybody early on was like, well, pick your niche and make that your whole message and make that your whole social thing. Because for me, that didn't work. If you asked me 3 years ago, what I wanted to focus on, I said I was going to be an employee engagement professional, like an employee engagement expert. I actually booked some like domain names and things. Then I was like, I'm going to be an executive coach full-time, which I did for a while. But then executive coaching turned into facilitation, which turned into speaking. And it wasn't until I experimented like hell with all of it that it became clearer to me what I wanted to do. So if I had niched down early on, I could have spent a Herculean amount of time, energy, and effort on something that maybe I would have liked a little, but I needed to play with a lot of different options to figure out what I liked a lot. And I'm one of those people who I generally like most things, but my barometer, my personal barometer for work that I want to spend my time doing, and I actually heard this from one of my own coaches. She said, Henna, when do you watch the clock? When do you watch the clock? Whenever you watch the clock, do less of that, right? When you're looking up at the clock going, oh my God, it's only been 5 minutes. Oh my God, I still have 10 minutes left. Do less of that. But for now, I mean, Yaro, I'm sorry to give you the, kind of do it all answer, but I would suggest play in both ponds and start to pay closer attention to your energy. Does one of them feel like amazing? Does one of them feel like more work? If you enjoy both of them, I'm team both of them. We can be multi-hyphenates. I'm trying to be J-Lo without the dance moves and the amazing booty. Like that is, I want to be an author. I want to be a speaker. I want to be a coach. And if anybody tries to put me in a lane and force me to be in it, I will be wildly unhappy. And it's not hurting me at all. So
love it.
Play with it.
Thank you. And more power to you.
Yeah.
Phenomenal advice. All right. Our cleanup hitter is in Portland, Oregon. Bruce, don't let us down, brother.
I love your energy.
Thank you.
Our kids are about the same age, and I'm asking a question kind of on behalf of my kids who started school today for the first time. My oldest, high school. And, they are, like most everybody, more afraid of public speaking than death itself. Mm-hmm. And all the research shows that. Any advice on how they can somehow overcome that fear?
Yeah. So we have 3 dinner table questions that we ask every single day. One of them is related to this work, right? The good, awkward work. So our 3 questions are, and just for reference, my kids are 13, so 8th grade, and 11, so 6th grade. So they're in middle school, aka the most awkward years of all time, right? This is we're in it fully. So our dinner table questions are, what was the best part of your day? What was something new you learned? But then this is the biggie. What's something that gave you butterflies today? Our 3rd question is, what's something that gave you butterflies today? And it has 2 objectives. The first is, I want to celebrate them when they've put themselves in a position where something gave them butterflies. I raised my hand. I went to the front of the class. you know, sometimes it's this boy looked at me and I talked to him, right? But I want to normalize that I'm celebrating these butterfly feelings. And secondarily, and perhaps most important, they know these questions are coming at the end of every day. And they know mom and dad get really excited when they have an answer to the butterflies question. So what it does at the beginning of each day is it primes them to look for those opportunities. It primes them to be scanning their environment for a butterfly moment. And so, you know, do they have one every single day? Not every single day, but they know that when they bring one, we're fist pumping. We're good job, kiddos. Like we're really proud of that. We celebrate the effort, not the outcome. And so our hope is that we are priming that mentality. And, you know, speaking up in classes, I feel like precursor to public speaking up on behalf of a friend, precursor. So just little seeds of butterfly seeking, I think, is the best we can do right now.
Awesome answer. Thank you.
Sure.
Phenomenal advice. Incredible hour. It flew by. Henna, thank you so much for joining us. This was unbelievable. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. You guys are fantastic, and keep in touch. If we're not connected on LinkedIn already, I'd love to make new friends over there, or Instagram. Just LinkedIn's my
definitely
playground.
Pre-order Henna's book. It comes out on the 26th. And when you get the book, make sure you read it and make sure that you leave a review on Amazon. I know that will mean a ton to Henna. And again, Henna, I can't thank you enough. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you. And if you do pre-order, ping me a message and I'll send you some goodies in the mail because I like to spoil my people. So just let me know if you do.
Nice. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. And don't forget, next Tuesday, Dr. Talia Moda. It's going to be very, very